We're going to talk about the most commonly misused term in the hair world, which is balayage. Say it with me. Balayage. Balayage. This is the literal definition of a balayage. It's a technique for highlighting hair in which the dye is painted on in such a way to create a graduated, natural looking effect. The word itself is French. It means sweeping. So I'm sure you guys have seen all of these videos of girls doing balayages. They're taking the product and they're sweeping it up the hair, creating more of a diffused line that also creates more of a lived-in look. But that's besides the point. What I'm here to debunk is that a balayage is a technique, not a service. Yes, it's a lot easier to say, here, I want to book a balayage, because we understand what you're saying. But don't get it confused, because a balayage is not a service. How your stylist applies the product is what determines whether or not it's a balayage or a traditional highlight, baby light, etc., etc. I know we've all heard of foilage, open air processing, hand painting, we've heard it all. And guess what? They're all the same thing. Let's start with foilage. Foilage is basically doing a balayage, but incubating it with foils. Some stylists call it a foilage, but it's still a balayage, you're just using foils. As you can see here. This is a look that I created using the foilage technique. I still did a balayage. I just used foils because I wanted to incubate and get a lot of brightness on her ends. Moving on to an ombre. So an ombre is having tones of color that shade into each other, graduating from light to dark. If you don't remember, this is pretty similar to what the definition of balayage was, except an ombre is a desired result. You use a balayage technique to get this desired result. This is more of an ombre, except guess what? I still used foils for this one, but there's more contrast through the top than there is the bottom. An ombre basically means one color gradiating into the next. There's little dimension through the top and little dimension through the ends, but has a great graduation between the two. Moving on to open air balayage. This just means that they're leaving the lightener in the open air to process. Usually you use clay lighteners for this. Kenner has a clay lightener that actually has a kale clay polymer extract. What this does is basically hardens the outside when it air processes and keeps the hair inside moisturized, that way it can continue to process. But open air processing basically means you're going to get more of a sun-kissed effect, a more natural effect, something more lived in. This is one of my guests that I did an open air balayage on. As you can see, it's very diffused, there's a lot of dimension, and it looks super natural. This last one's fun. It's a wet balayage. I applied lightener to her hair and swept it up like a balayage when her hair was wet. It's all about the application, not about how you process it. Balayage is a technique, not a